Hello, everybody. Well met. This is Founder Leroon with Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to do a little prep session. If you guys watched Digital Dave do these, it'll be kind of something similar to that. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm going to go through some of the different things that I do when I prep for my games. This may or may not reflect what you have to do or what you might do, but the process should be fairly similar, even if you play Pathfinder or one of the other core rules. As far as Fantasy Grounds goes, I wanted to show that it's not too bad for prep. It actually does a pretty good job. This is one of the things I think that Fantasy Grounds has an edge on, is the prep part of it. Once you have everything in place, it's pretty simple to prepare for an encounter. If you're spending more than an hour on your game prep at a time, it might be a little excessive. So if you could keep it under an hour, that's what you're hoping for. That's what you want to shoot for. So I'm going to be preparing for a one-shot that I'm running Saturday on the 30th, which is in a couple days. This will be a Halloween-themed horror one-shot. It is going to feature some content that is official and some content that isn't, mostly third-party and homebrew stuff. So this gives you a real feel for the actual interface and how Fantasy Grounds works, as opposed to just running a module, which has most everything set up for you. So this is going to take a little bit of extra work to put this stuff together, but it gives you some insight on how some of the key features of Fantasy Grounds works. And I believe that's why Josh and Dave decided to work together on the Fantasy Grounds Fridays and the Saturday show, because he's building assets with Josh, and he's also creating a town, and they're doing all kinds of cool things. So that's a really good idea to get people involved with the rule set. Like, how do you actually use it? Where does the where's the rubber meet the pavement? And that's kind of what some of these shows do, is they give you an idea of how to use Fantasy Grounds to run your content, whatever it might be. So if you're doing Pathfinder or Starfinder, that a lot of this will be very similar. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If you have any criticism or complaints, let me know. I'm good with that too. But for the time being, I'm going to be running a one-shot Saturday. There is an invite and a link at the end of the video if you're interested in joining. It's going to be at 3 Eastern p.m., and it is going to be 6 players. Right now we have 4 players. We had 1 person back out. Lady Shell is going to be playing with us, and we have some other guest community members. So I'm hoping that anyone that's a Fantasy Grounds Academy member, or even people from the outside, you guys can go ahead and join. But for the time being, I'm going to do a little prep for the game. And if you're going to plan on playing, I suggest you turn this off. It'd be a spoiler alert, but nonetheless, that way you don't have to ruin your fun and your time on that. So anyhow, let's get to the actual prep. So I'm going to work in Fantasy Grounds. I'm using the D&D 5e rule set. Right now I have the horror theme enabled. It kind of clashes with some of the decals, so if you are using the horror theme, try to keep your decals smaller. Like, this is a little bit much, but just letting you know that this particular theme, it kind of clashes with some of the official, or even my thing here. So keep it small or keep it simple. So what I tend to do actually during a game is I'll turn this off. So you got the advertisement there, Fantasy Grounds Academy. Okay, you get that. So I'm going to go to the options, and in the options there is a place where you can toggle for the desktop decal. So right now it's on custom, and I set this myself before the show. You can put it on the Strahd ones, which some of them work, but if you see, it kind of overrides that. So there's one in here that, like, this card one looks pretty good. There's a blood drop one, and then you can turn it off altogether. So I think the only one that kind of works is this one. And I think that's kind of cool for just flavor, even though I'm not playing Curse of Strahd. So that's something that you can do for your games to kind of set the mood, is kind of give some really cool decals. And I suggest, if you make your own decal, that you feather the edges and kind of blend them out, so when it goes onto the desktop, it kind of blends in with this background. So you can take this gray color and kind of incorporate it around the edges of your artwork, and don't make it perfectly square, and it'll blend in really nicely. So you can see there's a little bleed over here, but I don't mind a little blood in the mouth of this creature here. And I really like the dice tower. It's a little big, a little bulky, but when you drop a dice in there, his eyes glow. I think that's really cool. So that's a cool effect. I want to make sure that I have my players do some skill checks so that they can see that. The other thing is I'm going to change the color of the dice. Right now it's kind of a blue color. If you want to change your dice, you just click on the colors button here. And there is a color button. So if you click that, you can choose whatever color you want. Like I kind of want like this crimson red color. So I'm going to use the eyedropper. And if I come over and I hover over some of these components that are within the game system or within the rule set, it will take that color, whatever you want to do to highlight your dice and kind of make them interesting. So kind of want a blood red color. So I don't want them too bright. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not exactly what I want, but it's close. Yeah, there we go. So that's the dice color. So it has white lettering so I can see it. But if you wanted to change it to black, you could, and that looks just as good. So that's how you change the dice color. And you want to do that occasionally to change the mood of your game. And that's important, is to set a mood when you're getting ready to run your games or prepping for your session. Listen to some medieval scary music or something. It really does help inspire you to create and to add more content to your prep sessions, like photos, handouts. That's another thing, is looking for some good handouts. Just a few pictures that you can share with your players during the gameplay. It'll just make your game that much better. I'm gonna do that. I think live today is do at least one photo and show you the process of what I do to go through to make that more interesting. So for the time being, I'm going to design a few encounters. I'm kind of basing this off a principle of, there's 3 principles in role-playing games, mostly. There's probably more, but the 3 main ones are combat, exploration, and there is the interaction or the role-play, the engagement. So I think if you incorporate all 3 of those at some point in your session, if possible, that your game is going to be a lot more interesting. It'll appeal to more people. You don't get bored with just fighting all day or that sort of thing. So it's important to balance that out. So when you're running a session, even if it is a big combat, it's good to break that up with a little lore. Maybe somebody surrenders, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a full-on 4-hour battle. If you can think of things to throw in there to make things interesting, like maybe a worse enemy shows up and makes everyone have to flee or fight the other bad guy, which really makes it fun. So those are things that you could do to spice up your life. So the options menu right now, I set the message of the day, but I haven't put anything here. So I'm going to make a welcome message for the players that joined my table Saturday. So I'm just going to put some weird macabre kind of statement here. I haven't made it up yet, but I'm going to make up some kind of intro and maybe have a link to a graphic that's already shared, and they can click on it and they'll have a picture of the poster for the game or something like that. So that would be a really interesting approach on message of the day. So what happens is when they join your table and they go to claim characters, it will pop up and then they'll have the option to click on the link, which will take them to whatever image or map or even a journal entry, whatever you have set. You can link those in the message of the day. So I'm going to do that too. That will add to the story. Basically, I'll give them a little taste of what's to come, like some foreshadowing or something like that. And then, like, for options, I have the death indicator, which is basically a third-party extension that you can get on the Forge. It used to be on the Fantasy Grounds forums. They moved it to the Forge. It's a better place for it. It's been updated for Unity. It has some kind of like blood and tombstones when you have a death, and also it turns on saving throws for NPCs. and you would only put it on important NPCs, and that you can flag when you're setting up your encounters. I'll show you that, but it's pretty cool. But you can have preset or random indicators. It'll do auto death save rolls. So if you have like a boss or a major NPC and you don't want to, erase it or just leave them on the combat tracker and have to manage it, that will actually do his death saves, and you'll be able to tell if he survives or not, which is a really cool thing. I think a lot of times when NPCs or even minions, when they die, we remove them off the combat tracker because it's less cumbersome. But if you want something to survive and come back another day, this is definitely a cool thing. So I'm going to have this on just in case, and I'm going to have an NPC that might survive a battle. And what's nice is I could bring that on the players even after the game and let them know, well, he didn't die actually. So that'll keep them engaged even after we've played. So they may want to play again, or maybe this will become something. Who knows? So that's a fun little tidbit. So use the message of the day to introduce the game or to give people a message from the last session, whatever you want to do. But that is an option that's built into Fantasy Grounds. So that's a good tool to use, especially if you have a weekly or monthly campaign. That it's a really, really refreshing to have that. Used to be a third-party extension. Now it's part of the interface. So what I'm going to do now is create an encounter. So I have a couple in mind. I want a tough, kind of like a boss fight thing, but that's kind of towards the end. I want a challenge or a setback, and I have a trap in mind. It's pretty deadly. And then there are some minor things that I want, kind of like nuisances or kind of like a shock. So I'm going to work on a kind of a rat encounter. So the premise is that the house that they're in, I'll bring up the map. Let's see. So this is the second floor. I'm not done with that. That's where the boss fight's going to be. So I'll work on that a little bit later. I want to go to the first floor. So the first floor is going to be basically the entry level. This is where the party's going to start. They're already set and ready to go. I have them on the combat tracker too, and the party sheet. So all these guys are ready to go. So I've already done all the character prep. What I had in my library when I was doing this, I had a lot more books loaded. I had a ton of the coding effects and different books to create characters. But now that I'm done, I'm going into the modules and into the load filter, which only shows what you have loaded. And I'm just disabling the one, I don't need the race traits thing right now because I've already built the characters. I'll leave the spells up just in case players need to switch out their spells. I'll give them a little chance before the session starts. Class features, I don't really need that at the moment because I've already built the characters. They're all done. There is a trinkets table that I'm going to leave that up in case there's some little treasure items or trinkets that I want to bring up. I have the Fantasy Grounds Meanders map pack for horror haunts. This is where this haunted mansion comes from. This is from Game Tile Warehouse, Chris McDermott, Map Hatter. You know his work. It's pretty good stuff. It's on the Fantasy Grounds store too. I have the monster manual, player's handbook. I have a book about traps, which is where I got some of the ideas from a trap I'm going to build. I don't want to build it from scratch, so I'm just going to take something and throw that together so I can show you a quicker way to do it. I have the conditions and effects module loaded. If you don't own any of Rob Tui's coding effects, you're crazy because that's a godsend in some cases. You don't have to run everything automated, but it is helpful. One nice thing about the conditions and effects module is that it's a lot more universal. It's just not for player characters. So if you go up to your effects button up here, and mind you, I'm not a salesperson for Rob, but I definitely like his products. And this, in particular, conditions and effects, is a lifesaver because it even has exhaustion tables on here. It has a lot of the features that an NPC player character would have, but they're not usually coded or put into the sheet on their stat block. So if you're missing a feature like avoidance, or maybe you don't have aura of protection for a paladin NPC, this has all that. I mean, there's 5 pages of these effects. And a lot of them are just things like just the building blocks of a lot of the racial and the class features that are normally not included in the stat block. Some of these might be, but most of them aren't. And it's even got some generic ones, like if you want to give someone +1 on damage, and you could set the rounds for it, and then you just drag it to the combat tracker. I mean, it's that simple. And there's a ton of them, and you have a search field, so if you're looking for something in particular, you can search. And then, of course, you have all these presets that come with the game itself. But it's nice to have this arsenal of effects in case something isn't right with an NPC. Quite often, those are created for pen and paper, and you have all the books there, and you can look these up. But in Fantasy Grounds, if you want to automate anything, you either have to type it in the combat tracker, or you have to come up with your own. And these are already, pretty much baked in now because I have the module loaded. So this is something that would make your gameplay a little quicker or a little bit more automated if you're into that sort of thing. You don't have to automate everything, but it is nice to have this. So just kind of let you know what I have loaded here. I have the Dungeon Master's Guide simply because of the tables, and also that has traps and some information about that sort of thing. So I usually don't have the DM's Guide loaded. I normally don't need it, but I want to have it there just in case. I have the monster manual loaded for now until I get all the counters built. Once I'm done, I'll probably unload it. But you never know when you need to throw something else out there, so it's a good idea to have some sort of monster manual, or at least the SRD bestiary. The traps, trammels, and triggers, that's a Grim Press product. That's where I'm pulling the traps from. And I have a village backdrop called Ashford, and this is from Raging Swan Press. This is on the Fantasy Grounds store, and all they are towns that give you a starting point, and it has a little bit of lore and story. So if the game goes into the town, I have some content. So most of the adventure will be in the mansion, but I might want to have them go outside or something. They need people to talk to and things to see. So I have a village backdrop. I did some research on it. I actually added it to the campaign so that I have some maps that I can use and all kinds of cool stuff. So that's just kind of like a lifesaver, like a DM's tool. If you don't have anything prepared, then that's something you might want to slip into your campaign. So that's the kind of content I have loaded. A lot of miscellaneous stuff and just things that I might need, but try not to overload too much. And even this is getting a little excessive. Really, you just need the player's handbook, maybe these other 2 core books, and the conditions and effects. I left the spell codings up in case people want to switch their spells out. And then I have this trinkets table, which I probably won't use, but it's handy for giving out little knick-knack treasures and stuff, not necessarily coins. So that's what I have loaded. So everything else I'm going to do is going to be custom or just modifying existing content. And back to the options, I'm going to make sure the movement is on the variant, which it is. Hit points. So the NPC hit points, it's set to standard right now, which means that whenever you put them on the combat tracker, they're going to have an average or the same number. So I'm going to put it on random. So if I have a group of things or more than one combatant, they're all going to have different hit points, and it's not going to be the same. I don't really like the mob kind of thing unless that's what you're going for. And then, of course, there's party vision and party movement. So if you have somebody that has to control something like a summon creature or a druid wild shape or anything like that, you're going to have to turn that on so that you can allow your player to move and control and look through the eyes of the NPC. I don't have that, I don't think. I don't think I have anyone that can summon anything, so I don't need to turn that on. The other thing is the auto initiative for NPC. So if you drag monsters onto the combat tracker, they will automatically inherit whatever the set number is, which it'll roll, but they'll all have the same initiative, and I don't really care for that too much. So what I've done is I'm gonna change that to random because I don't want it. It's on to roll, but I don't want it on group, and that's one of the things I don't want. So I'm gonna have the initiatives are gonna be separate. The NPC numbering system, I have it on random. The default is append. So that would be 1, 2, 3. Every time you add an NPC, it numbers them. Well, if you put it on random, it's going to say like 3 of 28, and they're like, what? So this kind of freaks the players out. They won't have any idea what the true size of the encounter is. So that kind of helps mitigate that. Another thing is NPC roles fixed or variables. I have it on variables, so its default is variable, but if you have it on fixed, that means the creatures, whenever they do damage, it'll always do the average, not higher, not lower. So that's something you can do to control your game, especially if it's a lower level game and you're worried about a one-hit shot. Well, at least you'll know how many hits it'll take for someone to go down. I just put it on variable just in case. Let's see. So that's straw, decal image, chat, show GM roles. So if you want to show the dice tower, you have to have chat, show GM roles on, and you want to have the dice tower on so you can see this gargoyle dice tower, which is really cool. And like I said, when you drop the dice in there, it makes its eyes glow. So it's kind of cool. Kind of gives more feel and flavor to the game. So that's why I do that. You don't have to, and you can actually just show it to your players and not have it on yours. Because if you turn off chat, show GM roles on, when you roll, it'll automatically be hidden. They won't see the roll. But if you have it on and you want to see the dice tower too, if you roll in the open, they're going to see the result. So you'll have to drop it in the dice tower. That's the difference on the setting. They're kind of related or kind of tied into each other, sort of. And that's pretty much all I've done. And I also turned off the auto center on the map because I don't want the map to move around. Once I have this map set up and I have it where I want it, which I'll do right now because it's kind of cumbersome right now. So what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to size it to where I want it. And I got all these things open, and this is what you want to avoid when you're playing. So right now this is set up, so it's okay. But when you're playing, you don't want all this stuff all over the place. So this is going to be the starting point of the game. And I'm going to zoom to fit so that it fits in the pocket. And as you can see, I got a little bit more room here. So I think I'm going to stretch that just out a little bit more so I have a little bit more real estate. If you right-click on the map, you click View, and then Zoom to Fill, it will zoom it out to the extremities, and I think that's a good starting point. And then anything you do to the map, you can basically, you could basically have everything pinned here, so you don't have to worry. These two are townsfolk that are hiding inside the house. They're kind of been criminalized or outcasted, but they're tied into the town, so that's why I put them in there. So I'm going to have a trick staircase. So we have a trick or treat thing. So the trick is going to be a staircase. When you go up and you get near the top, it triggers a trap. If you have about 100 pounds of weight or more, the staircase collapses. It turns into like a slide, so to speak, pretty steep angle, and then it basically drops you down into a pit. And it's called the Doom Slide Trap is what it's called, but I'm going to modify it a little bit. But it's pretty nasty. You go down a spiral slide. It's got grease on it. It's pretty nasty. So we'll deal with that later. But these are my run notes that I'm going to use for the game itself. So I already have the NPC thing here. I'm going to go ahead and bookmark the map, because I don't want to have to keep looking for it. I do have it shortcutted on the bottom, but I want this as a run list. So when I'm using this, I have everything ready to go, and I don't have to deal with opening up the 5,000 different windows. I can just do it from here. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show in this stream too, is the organization part. So I'm pretty good on options. I don't need to change those right now. I think I'm good. I think the message of the day, I'll have to do that before the game starts, but that is pretty much the stuff I have loaded and some of the prep. So I'm going to actually get into the work or the hard part of this. So this is the the combat tracker. I have everyone on here already. They're ready to go. It's set to round 1. Go to the menu, click rest, and I'm going to do a long rest. And that resets all the initiatives and any spells that might be expired. Anything like that. So I'm getting all prepped for the game just in case. This is a one shot, so it's all right that I reset that. Now, if you're in the middle of a campaign and you haven't said that you're going to do a long rest, you probably don't want to do that. Okay, so now where do I want my notes to pop up? That's an important thing. So generally, I'll put them underneath the map. And I want to let you know that a lot of this stuff that I'm showing you isn't new. I mean, this has been done by many people before me. And the first person I saw doing this was Digital Dave. I learned this from him and from others, and watching and observing other people play. And I watch how much they struggle with the interface. And that's one of the things that doesn't need to be like that if you understand how it works. So what I'm doing right now is I am pre-placing pretty much everything where I want it to go. So like the PCs, I don't want that to pop up over there. I want it right here. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm taking this and placing them ahead of time so I don't have to dink around with it during gameplay. So this is where that character sheet's going to be. And I'm going to do that with all of them. So that's important that you have a method to your madness and a little bit of organization on where you want these windows to pop up. So that's what I'm doing right now, is just clicking on the windows that I'm going to be using during gameplay, or ones that you might use. And then I'm going to put them where I want them to show up. And that's why it's important to do this, because when you're playing, you will slow down digging around and moving windows around. And that's probably the biggest hassle that most people need to learn to get over that. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm taking these NPCs and characters and putting them in a specific place. So when it's time to play, I'm not looking for them. They're all right there. And what this does, since I've moved everything around, let's fix this one. It's too long. So why I'm doing this is to make it simpler for me and a lot smoother. So that's why it's important to do this. So this is also something that you'll just have to create for your own self. Like, how do you want it set up? You don't have to do it exactly like I have it here, but that's kind of what I do to kind of make things a little bit more organized and easier to use. Never thought to do that. Good idea. Yeah, so I don't know if you're referring to the notes, but that run list makes it so much easier, and you only use what you're going to use. You don't have to. You can put a couple extra things on there in case they go off the rails, but you generally don't have to worry about that if you've got it kind of set. You can kind of steer things the way you want a little. You can always make a deterrent table, and I'm going to show you what that is. All right, so that's all of the characters stacked up. There's the map. I can see everything. I can zoom in and out. Down here are my notes. Here's the dice tower. Here is the chat window. Here is the combat tracker. And this is the kind of thing you want to do for prep. Now, when you're clicking on the right-hand side of a combat tracker entry, that's a shortcut to the character sheet. And when you do that, it'll bring that up to the top. So whoever you want to view at the time, you can bring out that character up to the top. And I check it usually before I exit the session. So that's basically how you want to do it. So you can access everybody's sheet if you have to help your player. And then I have a trap here that I'm going to modify, which is this slide trap. So it's not locked, but if it was, I could make a copy of it and then undo it. So I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to go to the NPCs area. And this is from a module called Traps, Trammels, and Triggers. It's called the Doom Slide Trap. So I made a shortcut to it, so I should probably erase that shortcut because I'm going to make my own, and I'm going to make a new shortcut. And then also on my notes, I got to fix that too. So I'm going to take this Doom Slide Trap and just drag and drop it into the same window, which is going to make a copy of it. And it's not attached to anything at this point. When I mean attached, I mean part of another module. It's now its own unique instance of that. So what I'm going to do on top of that is go to the group area and make my own group. So I'm going to click this group drop down, and you'll see add category. So I'm going to add my own category. And I'm going to rename it by clicking the Edit Groups button. And I'm going to call this, I didn't want to mess with that. It's called Group 1 by default, so I'm going to call this Mansion creatures or mansion NPCs. That's what it's going to be. So this trap is basically an NPC, but it's going to be treated as a trap. So it's traps, vehicles, ships, all those things. Anything that can take damage or do damage is probably going to be an NPC. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the edit mode, and then I'm going to select the mansion NPCs once I get to that point. But I need to make sure that I drag this copy into that location, into the group. And the reason I'm doing this is for organizational purposes. It's a good habit, and it separates your editing and your stuff from the official stuff. It doesn't hurt to edit the official stuff. It won't ruin the mods or anything, but it does change it for this session. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. And in case I want to export this to use again in the future, I'll have my own groups and stuff, and that's how you would do that. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop. So I just drug this link and dragged it up to this new entry that I made. Now, you don't select anything when you drop this group down. Do not select anything. Just leave it open like that, and then you drag and drop it into the group that you want it to go in. Once you're done, then you select, and there it is. It's in the group. So that's the Doom slide trap. So that's basically something I'm going to modify and change. It tells you the traits of it, and I like most of what's on here. But I'm going to make another variant, which is going to be a wedge that appears in the middle of a tunnel that you slide down. So it's going to be a nasty trap. It's kind of a medium-sized or large-sized trap. It's pretty complex, and it's nefarious. So it's not a very fun thing. So this is a mansion that the players have to explore. It's been recently abandoned, and they're sent there to find out what happened to the owners. Some of the players have a motive to protect the asset. Some people are looking for stuff. So it's each player has their own little motive, but most of them are loosely affiliated with one another. So hopefully they'll work together. So the trap is, really doesn't have an armor class or anything or any stats. It's just generic, but it does have traits. So there's saving throws on here that will parse if you're set it up right, and it tells you some things to do, and then there's some damage associated with it. So it depends on what happens, but you basically go down a steep incline or a spiraling slide, and you meet your fate. So at the end of a slide, it could be a pit of snakes. I thought about a Neo-Otia being at the bottom inside of kind of like a scrap pile. Like basically all the poop and the urine goes down there, and then there's this trap that slides you in there. And if the Otiug and the snakes don't get you, then the disease will set in and everything else, and it's hard to get out. It's almost impossible to get out of the pit. Then the other variant is the Pit of Impalement, which is going to be similar to what I'm going to use. I'm going to just create another trait. I'm going to add it to here. I'm not going to delete anything just in case I want to use the trap differently. So these are just variations on the same trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and make another trigger. So I want to take an existing one of these and just kind of rearrange it. So this is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to also grab a swarm of rats. So I'm going to go to the NPCs, and I want to look up a swarm, see if I can find one. But I have to go back to all. That way I can see everything. I'm not stuck in my own group. And I'm going to type swarm, and I'm going to see if there's any. Yeah, so there's swarm of bats, swarm of whatever. So I'm going to do swarm of rats. And the reason I want to do a swarm, because they're a little bit tougher, and I can make a couple groups of these, and they're just annoying as hell. So this is going to be one of the first combat encounters, and it's just a big letter S. So there's really no fancy token, but I might look for one. I'll have to see. But again, I want to make a copy of it. So I'm going to take swarm of rats. It made a copy. It's not attached to the monster manual anymore. I'm going to drop the group down, and I'm going to navigate or scroll to wherever I want to put it. So it's the mansion NPCs that I want to drag and drop it to, and that is that. And now I'm going to pick one last encounter. This is going to be like the boss fight, I guess. So I was thinking it would be a combination of undead, but one set of things I wanted to iterate was that some of the undead will be corporal, some will not. So there'll be a ghost, I think, or some kind of apparition, and then there'll be some zombies. I mean, or ghouls or something like that. So that's basically how I'm going to make that encounter happen. So I'm going to go ahead and look for those while I'm here. So let's check out ghost, and there's all kinds of ghosts. So I don't want the ghost to be super powerful, but there's an undead spirit ghostly template that I could use for this encounter. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So there's multi-attack, there's a deathly touch. Might use that template. It might be helpful if you want to make a custom one, or you can use a standard ghost, which isn't that bad actually. 45 hit points. What is a CR4? This is perfect. I don't have to do much to this. I don't even have to modify it, to be honest. I can run this just as it is. So I might just make a copy in case I want to modify it. So again, I'm just dragging it, and then I'm going to drop the copy into the group that I want to use. And now I'm going to use some ghouls or ghasts or something. So ghouls are a little bit quicker than, let's see, they're a little bit quicker than your standard creatures. Yeah, so they have a bite. Yeah, they're pretty tough. So I don't want a bunch of those. So maybe 2 of them, during the encounter. So I'll have a couple ghouls that are the victims of the ghost, I guess, and then the ghost itself. So I think that'll be good enough. This is a one shot, so you don't want the encounter to be too big, where it takes more than a couple hours. So that's kind of what I'm going for. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that just in case. So I'm going to drag and drop it again, and then I'm going to select the group I want to stick it in, which is the mansion one. And that should be all the NPCs that I'll need for the actual one-shot. So that is something. Hey, Jim, what's going on? So this is basically I'm doing some prep for the horror game I'm going to run. So here's a mansion NPCs. Okay. These are all the NPCs that I'm going to use during this encounter. Other than that, they're just going to be townsfolk and that sort of thing. So I have a group of rats, I have a trap, and then I have the boss. That's pretty good for one session. That's 4 hours worth of stuff to do. And of course, there's exploration, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to have some books in case they look at the bookshelf. And then, there's this poker table or this game table. I might put a deck of cards up there as a treasure, like an old tarot deck or some kind of expensive, fancy playing deck. If anyone wants loot, I'll put little things like that in there. But it's not a big treasure hunt. There is some treasure here, but it's definitely not coin and such. All right, so that is the idea behind this. So I have all the NPCs that I'm going to use. So now I got to build the encounters. So when you're making encounters, you want them balanced. This group is levels 3 to 5. So a CR4 encounter is not too bad, especially if it's just one. But we'll see what it looks like. I'm going to start with the harder one and work my way back. So let's go with the main one. So I have ghouls and ghasts and ghosts and things like that in there. So I'm going to open up the encounters group. And I've already made my own group. This is the mansion encounters. So I'm going to make probably 2 encounters tops. The slide trap doesn't need to be an encounter. It doesn't move. There's things about it that you don't need to make an encounter for it, unless you want to award points like experience points or something for disabling the trap or avoiding it. But in this case, it's a one-shot, so I'm not really giving out experience points. So that's something we don't need to do. So the first encounter, I'm going to call this. This is the treat. So undead treat is what I'm going to call it. So this is the combat. This is the treat of the adventure. And the treat is that the players get to work together, have fun, and they get to battle some classic creatures. So I'm going to drag the ghost over, and I'm going to drag the ghouls. So the ghouls are the unwitting victims of the ghost. So there's a couple of them. So I'm going to put 2 ghouls and 1 ghost. And when you have a NPC that's built correctly, you hit this little swoosh thing. That's a CR5 encounter worth 1500 XP. That's a pretty tough fight. I don't think I need much more than that. Even though I have 5 or 6 characters that are levels 3 to 5, I think this will keep them quite busy. Even if I feel like maybe I need to add one more ghoul, that might be the top right there. And if I hit that swoosh thing, it's still a CR5 and we're 1700 XP. And like I said, I'm not really worried about experience points. I'm more worried about the balance and how much time it's going to take. So I think that for maximum, if you take that time and add that to the 6 players, that's 10 turns. So that's quite a bit of moving this combat tracker around. So I think that's the maximum I want to add to that, just for the sake of time and also complexity. Because you have the ghouls, they just basically bite and claw. So they're kind of distracting. They're more like cannon fodder in this case. And they're immune to poison. You can't charm them, exhaust them. They're basically immune to a lot of the stuff. They do quite a bit of damage, 2d6 claw damage, or to bite damage, and then they have a paralyzing claw attack. So that's pretty nasty. So if anyone gets paralyzed, they're screwed. So that's pretty nasty. So 2 or 3 of those running around paralyzing people plus a ghost, I think that's plenty. I don't think I need much more. I might only just go back to 2 ghouls, because if they paralyze a couple players, that's it. So I'm kind of on the fence about 2 or 3 ghouls. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put one more ghoul on here as a separate entry. And this will be like a wave. So if for some reason I want that extra ghoul, I'll put it in there. And I might actually just make it a different encounter and not even worry about it. Because if I need to, I can just revitalize one of them and start over. So that's the undead treat. So I'm going to call this retreat, because hopefully the players will treat. And that's the name of the encounter. I just did that for myself for a little fun. And that's going to be linked to the upper floor. So when I bring up that map, I'm going to link that to the upper floor, and I'm going to link it to my run note. So here's my run notes. If I come down to this point and I unlock this, I am going to add this particular encounter. So if I just hit enter, and I'm just going to drag and drop this encounter into that area. But I want to change tokens. So before I do that, before I link anything, I want to make sure that I have this. And I need to relink the trap because I changed it. So if I go to Doom Slide Trap, if I do any changes to it and then I link it to something, I have to go back and fix it. So you do all your work first, and then at the end, you link everything together. So don't get ahead of yourself like I have here. I'm already starting to link things here, and I want to make sure that's done before I do that. So that is that. Okay, so that is basically that. So that's just the start. I'm just kind of building the encounters right now. So that's one of them. I'm going to go to my assets. I want to see if I have any tokens, and God knows I have tokens. So I paid a lot of money and time on these things or at least I want to use them. So I have a tokens button up here. If you're using Fantasy Grounds and you just updated, you only have to single click now. They changed the asset window, which is nice. You don't have to double click anymore. You single click and it brings up whatever window. So here are my Bernardo tokens, or I can go to Undead, which is going to narrow them down if I find them. Yeah, I want to go back. So Undead, here's Bernardo's tokens. Now those are some demons. And I just got zapped by the double click. Single click. And now I'm inside of the directory. Here's some undead. So ghouls right here. So this ghoul is pretty nasty looking. It's the one I'm using on the flyer. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto this area. I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to replace the master token with this token. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto the encounter, and I don't have to change the NPC, which is nice. Leave the NPC as it is. So I'm going to drag and drop it. It replaces the tokens temporarily just for this encounter, so that's handy. Now I want to look for like a ghost. See, I have these wraiths here, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Although, you know, a ghost is a ghost. I think this black wraith might do the trick. And I like the idea that it's got the orange, kind of has that Halloween pumpkin look to it. So I think I will use this wraith, even though it's not a wraith. And that replaces that token. So we got our ghost and our ghouls. Now that I've done that, and I'm happy with that, if you want to change the faction to default as, you know, as aggressive or neutral, you could do that, or it'll just inherit the alignment from that comes off the stat block. So that's what faction means. So let's refresh just in case. And yes, it did change because I took it down to 2 again. So that is basically done. So once I'm done with that, then I want to start linking it. So I'm going to take the Undead Retreat and drag and drop it underneath the mansion area. And that's basically the place where I want this to, you know, come up. So I might rearrange these links so they're in order. And as far as this goes, it's not going to come up for very long, so I'll just have it pop up here, down at the bottom here. And then I'm going to put my notes back where I had them. I move this encounter. So there's a lot of a mess right here, but when I get it all tidied up, you'll see how easy it is. So this is the undead. Now I'm going to work on the rat swarm. So here's the swarm of rats. Drag and drop that on here. And I don't think I want really more than a couple of these, so I might put 2 swarms of rats. And then I'm going to hit the refresh. And this is only a CR half. But I'm going to call this, let's see, Rat Attack. Because that's basically what happens. When they come in the house and they start exploring this lower level, they're going to smell the scent of urine and the smell of rotten food. So basically this kitchen has been abandoned, and there's some, you know, food laying around that's all rotten and crusty and nasty and probably way past the maggot stage. But nonetheless, they're going to smell that wafting odor. You're going to think something died in here. And there's potentially something could have. So they're going to come in here, and they'll notice this fire's lit, which is weird. Normally that would have burned out long ago. They don't know there's a couple townsfolk hiding here. They were using it for warmth, but when they heard the players come in, they hid in this little game room. So anyways, the players come in. When they start exploring, if they go near the kitchen, there's 2 locked doors that basically go into, there's a locked door that goes into this dining area. If they go in here at all, the rats are going to come out and get them. So that rats are going to be in swarms, not just a couple rats. So that's important to know that. And it makes them tougher, and they're much harder to deal with when they're in that form. So they can occupy another creature's space and vice versa, and the swarm can move through any large opening enough for a tiny rat. So they can funnel through small areas. The swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. And then there's a bite attack, which is pretty nasty. It's 2d6 piercing or 3d6 piercing if the swarm has half of its hit points or fewer. So it has adjustments for when you actually start whittling these down. So when you get to about 12, then you start doing less damage. So that's really cool how swarms are set up. And then there's the nature of the swarms on the back. It tells you, you know, what they are and what they're doing. So the swarm of rats is Jordan. Okay, so this is, it gives you other ideas of different swarms. So if you wanted to use web walkers or web senses or any other things on there, this gives you an idea of how to do that. So there's your swarms. Now I want to see if I actually have a different swarm instead of that letter S. I want to see if I can use some of my assets. So I'm going to look for swarm in my tokens. See if I have something other than the letter S. And that's important that that basically that you have some assets that you want to replace and make things look good. This is also going to be on a live stream, so I don't want to just show some generic stuff. I actually want to have something cool. So here's a swarm of beetles. There's centipedes, insects. There's the rats right there. That might work. And then there's also spell token that could also double up as that. So there's some spiders, wasp. Yeah, I'm going to use this rat swarm. So all I'm going to do is drag and drop this swarm of rats. See, there's a swarm of kippers. So here's a swarm of rats. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto this particular counter. Refresh it just in case. And that's it. So I'll lock it. And that's our swarm of rats. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm happy with it. I'm going to make it, the faction's going to start off hostile because they're just going to attack on sight. They're ravenously hungry. They've already eaten most of the stuff. So once the players go into the kitchen, they're going to start attacking. And they're actually going to come out. If they don't go in the kitchen, they're still going to attack. But it's going to take some noise and a little bit of time. So there's the 2 encounters for the adventure. That wasn't too bad. The one that's more complex is the trap. And that's the one I really wanted to focus on. Because this is one that most people don't mess with too much. So I'm going to put my notes back where I want to keep them. And here are the encounters. So there is the NPCs. Here's the encounters. So I don't need the encounters anymore. So I'm done with the encounters. The only thing I need to work on now is the Doom Slide Trap. I'm going to open that up, and I'm just going to rename it as Mansion Trap or Mansion Stair Slide Trap or something like that. So I remember. This is a staircase that's going to collapse when they climb up there.